So here's the thing. I wanted to start off with a big question. Transforming support from being perceived as a cost center, something that needs to be contained, right? That we have to have it. We're going to have people that have questions and need help, to a revenue generator in the business. That's a very, very different perspective for the C-suite to have. So what I'd love to do is, how did you make that transition? Or how do you want to start us down the path to explain or understand what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started in support, the perception of support internally and externally was very poor. So internally, people just didn't trust the support department as a whole. And that definitely translated over to our customers. And customers actually didn't want to engage with us at all. They didn't want to meet with us. They didn't want to submit issues because in the past, those issues just wouldn't get resolved. So the first step in rebuilding that relationship was getting the internal support. So that way we could ultimately convey that externally to our customers and rebuild those relationships. And so, like I had mentioned in my intro, by being accountable, right? And making sure we're going to do something, we actually do it. And then delivering a lot of really quick wins initially within the first 30 days of me stepping into that role, and then making sure we had the right team members in place to be able to position support to continue to grow. And so one of the first exercises that we did was start to build out this framework around understanding what are the technical needs across the team, what are soft skills that the team needs to be able to have, and then how can we apply that to each person's individual personal development growth plan, so that way they can continue to grow across support. And so after things were stabilized, which took a little bit of time, and started to rebuild those relationships with customers, then we were able to spend more time focusing internally in tandem, training the team and upskilling them on those areas. So that framework was really instrumental early on to be able to identify what are knowledge gaps across the team, but then also making sure we have the right resource for the right problem. When we first started in support, everybody was doing everything and there wasn't really anybody specialized in anything.
So let me ask this. I love the way that you answer that question. Well, in order to be perceived differently by executive management, first we got to get our house in order, right? And we got to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and delivering the customer support with excellence. So I'd love to have you spend just a little bit more time on what you changed and explain a little bit more about that framework, and then transition into, how do we then change this perception? But so you mentioned the framework and you mentioned some really important things in there, but I want to get a little bit more depth in there in terms of what specifically you were trying to accomplish and realigning, different roles and skill sets and things like that. If you wouldn't mind taking us a little bit deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we have our support organization structured is we have a service desk or a help desk, right? And they triage all incoming inquiries. So they do need to know a little bit about everything just to make sure they're gathering the right information, and then they can triage it appropriately. And then we have a cloud services team and a service engineering team. And the service engineering team focuses on our on-premise software and then our hardware. And then cloud services focuses on our cloud-based solution. And so that was the first piece, was making sure that we had a technical understanding mapped out of, okay, what types of problems might somebody come to us and what questions we need to ask. So that's where we developed simple things like checklists, scripts, so that way that help desk team was properly triaging things so it could get to the right place with the right resource in a timely fashion. And then from there, that's where we started to understand the matrix and building out that skills matrix. So the first thing we did is ask each individual, assess yourself. Where do you think you're at? And then we had the manager independently assess that person. And then we had them come together and have a conversation and then align on where they're actually at. Because a lot of times when we're doing a self-assessment, we might be too critical of ourselves one way or the other, right? And it's hard for us to actually see that true placement. And then sometimes the manager doesn't have all the context of different scenarios that person might be exposed to. So we found that to be a really helpful exercise. And we did that outside of our typical performance reviews, because we wanted to be building this matrix independent of their past or kind of current performance indicators. And so that's where it started to allow us to think about support, not just from like this reactive state, but a lot of technical and customer success support teams live in, to being more proactive. So some of the proactive pieces we started to work through are, what are some trainings and workshops that we can have of these gaps that we know that we have? But then what are services that we can provide to customers to be proactive in their environment? And these services are things that we already had been kind of offering, but we hadn't really been promoting them to customers. And so one of the services that we do with our core customers is, think of it like a home inspection. So we'll go in, proactively check all of the hardware, the software, make sure there's no problems before a court starts. And we'll do that on a cadence basis. So that way, when they enter the room, they know they're not going to have any issues with capturing the official record, versus in the past, right, we were just relying on them using the system and then reporting an issue to us. So that has been pivotal in some of our very large enterprise customer environments where we're managing 400 plus courtrooms.